Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So, shalom and welcome. Thank you for joining us for this very important and timely briefing today. My name is Alicia Post. I am the Executive Director of the RZA, the Religious Zionists of America. Mizrachi. It's a movement that strives to build a strong bridge between Israel and the American Jewish community, supporting the state of Israel, and ensuring that American Jews are connected to and taking responsibility for the state of Israel and the future of the Jewish people. This program is being recorded and it will be available for viewing. We will be sure to send out the link. So, Mizrachi, the RZA has been up to a lot of exciting things. We have Rav Jerry Eisenberg from the RZC Chicago on. We've started this year the Maslul and Mizrachi campus programs. I'm really excited to tell you just very briefly about it. So it is a comprehensive leadership pipeline designed to cultivate, inspire, and empower the next generation of religious Zionist leaders in North America. It aims to combat assimilation, strives to strengthen Jewish and Zionist commitment, and guiding young Jews from high school through adulthood, and structured programs focusing on Torah, Israel advocacy, and community building on campus and as young professionals. By partnering with organizations like Yavna, B'nai Akiva, and many others, Maslul connects, it's a national network of inspired activists revitalizing young Jewish life and shaping the future of the religious Zionist movement. So I'm very excited. We have hundreds of young people involved and actively engaged. I will additionally mention the Hanukkah edition of Ha-Mizrachi magazine is now out. You can go to our website to find it virtually, or of course in your local shul. You will hopefully find copies. And if you have any questions or need anything, you can always reach us here. And I will put in the chat our email and our information so that you have it. I would love to welcome our president, Stephen Plato, who will be introducing our esteemed speaker today for this important briefing.
Thanks, Alicia. It's a interesting day. Rabbi Leiter, Ambassador Leiter, I first met him in the late 1970s, early 1980s when I lived in West Orange. At that time, he was the speaker, or the right word, I guess, would be the public face of the settler movement in Yehuda and Shomron. And I believe he was the first director of what they call now the Yechiel Council. And unfortunately, we share an all too common experience in Israel. His son was killed in combat in Gaza, at the beginning of the Swords of Iron War, and he um, uh, he stands tall. And that is I think the secret for Israeli families. You stand tall, you stand tall, you put one foot in front of the other, and you keep on going. And being a spokesman for our state of Israel in Washington is maybe the penultimate success story. I'll leave the future ultimate success to time. There was a poem written by Natan Alterman before the declaration of the state in 1948, and it was called Magesh HaKesef, the Silver Platter. And if you haven't read it, I recommend you do. But I'll tell you the theme is memorial service. War had not started, and people were concerned. And Chaim Weitzman at the time made a comment that the nation, our state, will not be handed to us on a silver platter. That's the name of the poem, and it concludes with a somber but uplifting note, and it ends by telling the reader that the rest of the story will be told in the Chronicles of Israel. And those chronicles are still being written. It's not over. They're not closed. The book is not closed. It's an ongoing um, struggle with life, with reconciliation of what's around us. The visceral hatred that is out there, not only for Israel but for Jews wherever we are. Um, I, I've been on X, formerly Twitter, for a couple of years, and every now and then I look at posts that are not from the people I'm following, but from the rest of the world, and the venom, the bloodlust that these people express in their tweets or their writings is beyond comprehension. There are some Israelis who are striking back by getting some of these people, especially in Muslim countries, into YouTube programs. And what's not funny, but the Israelis speak better Arabic than the people that they interview, mainly because one of them comes from Iraq. So his Arabic is flawless, and when he tells people that he's a Jew and an Israeli, they usually disconnect because they don't want to hear the truth at that point. But the ignorance that is out there, that our grandchildren are being exposed to is to me a frightening sign. So I just got back from 3 months in Israel. It's freezing here in New Jersey, but I don't have to deal with the rain in Israel, which one of the memes going out is, rocket attacks and people are in the streets and they're dancing and they're partying. And when the rain came the other day, they all started running in circles looking for shelter, which is a typical Israeli response, I suppose. I believe the ambassador is joining us at 9:10. Hopefully he'll be here within a minute. Personally, I'm very excited to have him on with us. And this will just be another indication what we can do in the 21st century here. My friend Rav Jerry Eisenberg, who is on here, is way out there on the cutting edge of internet and mechanics of getting things done. And he's given me some lessons and even how to set up an email account. I mean, that's how good he is. But what's telling is that we no longer seem to be able to live without our devices. And one day I predict that device will no longer be held in our hands. It'll be embedded in our behind our ears, and we'll be able to speak and hear and do things with voice commands. That's the power of the future.
Good morning from freezing Washington, D.C. Stefan, you are just visioning the future. I don't think it's going to take too long till we reach that. Hello, everyone. This is Sosan Hasson from the Israeli Embassy. I just came back this week from Israel, so my voice is usually a little bit sharper, but I got sick with a -7 degrees Celsius here in DC, welcoming me after 23 degrees in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv. I'm very happy to be with you. Our ambassador is going to join us in a couple of minutes. And it's a pleasure to open our morning with so many friends and people that we work with and are willing to be engaged in the embassy's work. I will, if you have any, further questions before the ambassador starts, I'll be happy to talk. Alicia, thank you so much. In fact, Abby Talmud, who is a member of my team, the public diplomacy team at the embassy, was the one who coordinated and facilitated the meeting. She is on her way back from Israel with a big delegation of policymakers and health system here in the United States in a federal level who visited Israel the last week and had a very fruitful engagement and exposure to the Israeli health system in AI, as Stephanie have started before, innovation, and also the diversity of the state of Israel. I'm afraid that we are getting and we are hearing a lot of incidents and cases in health system in the United States about the rise of anti-Semitism, both facing the doctors and the patients from both sides of the health systems providers, and we hope that this kind of an engagement will actually assist the different leaders in the health system to understand better what is Israel about, what we have been facing since October 7, and how sophisticated is the health system in Israel and advanced and diverse as well.
Susan, you mentioned the anti-Semitism in the medical circles. It's not confined to the United States. Obviously, it's happened in Great Britain. It's happened in
Sure,
Canada.
sure.
And it just, to use an old phrase, it boggles the mind
Yeah,
that a person who is supposed to be trained to save lives is willing to take them because the patient is a Jew. And it does not bode well for humanity. It doesn't bode well for humanity.
absolutely. I see our ambassador joining us. So I'm turning the floor to our ambassador and to Alicia.
Good morning, His Excellency Dr. Yechiel Leiter. I like that. I like that very much. It's much nicer what people call me. So well,
Stephen, if we could just leave it at Yechiel, I'll feel even better.
Yechiel it is then. Yechiel it is then. That's one of the things I love about Israelis.
I'll tell you a story. Can I tell you a story about His Excellency?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So my brother-in-law was here for a while, a few months ago, and I was hanging around with me, and he heard everybody saying, Your Excellency, His Excellency, and apparently when he went back, he told my mother, who's 90, 91. And when I went to visit her in Scranton, she said, Yechiel, tell me, is it true that they're really calling you His Excellency? And I said, Mom, yeah, it comes with the territory. And she said, she stopped for a minute and thought, and she said, don't let it go to your head. And a few weeks later, I was in Israel, and I had to do laundry. I had to do my laundry. It happens to even ambassadors, right? And I threw my wash into the washing machine, and it didn't work. I couldn't do my laundry, so I threw my laundry in a sack, put it on my shoulder, and as I was walking down the neighborhood trying to find a washing machine among my neighbors, I was thinking, His Excellency, His Excellency.
Well, at least your mother didn't say to you, by excellencies, but that's what mothers are for. That's what mothers are
Right,
for.
exactly.
Thank you again for being here with us. What I'd like to do today is maybe talk about some statecraft, what Israel needs, what America can do, and what next year can look like or will look like, because it's only a couple of weeks away. Yechiel, I want to start out with something very personal. I hope you don't mind. If you don't want to answer, you'll answer a different question. Your personal experience being the father of a victim of Hamas, your experience being intimately involved with families in Yehuda and Shomron over the years, um, has to be internalized at some point in time. How do you think that has shaped your experience when you speak for the people of Israel? And maybe most importantly, is there something when you meet an American representative of the government that you wish they would take away from the meeting with you? Do they feel anything in their gut about what's happening in Israel and our Israelis' lived experiences?
Yeah, well, thank you, Stephen. Look, I carry my son with me to every meeting, to every appearance, every speech, every event I have, either on the Hill or in the White House, every negotiation, every act of diplomacy. He's with me, and I feel that I really have to live for him as well. You know, when the prime minister called me and asked me to come to Washington, I was driving somewhere out of Tel Aviv, and my esteemed colleague Ron Dermer called and said, "You know, you're going to get a call from the prime minister. Be ready." So, prime minister always speaks very quickly on the phone. So I pulled over to the side just to make sure I could actually hear him, and picked the phone up from the speaker. And sure enough, in 3 minutes, he was on the line, and he said, Yechiel, I want you to go to Washington. This was about 4 or 5 months after Moshe was killed, and it was still in the thick of the war. And I guess he sensed my hesitation on the line. So he said, "What would your son say?" And at that moment, I realized that the dilemma that I had within myself since my son was killed, the dilemma of whether or not to really go on living, not in the sense of, you know, taking my life or something, but actually living, you know, living, getting through the day alive, positively and definitively. There were mornings that it was very difficult to get out of bed, kind of, you don't want to scrape yourself off the floor. And at that moment, when he said that, what would your son say? I said, this is really my son speaking and telling me, Abba, you got to go on. You got to get out of bed. You got to get off the floor, and you have to go on living, not only for yourself, but for me too, because my life was cut short and I had plans. So at that moment, I said, okay, got it. Yeah, I'll go. And he said, okay, just keep it under wraps. Turned out that was the longest kept secret in the annals of political history in Israel, because I don't leak. I don't leak. And he doesn't leak. We were the only two people on the line. As a matter of fact, when I got to the embassy, I met with the staff. I have the best staff of any embassy in Washington, and the really the cream of the crop of Israel's foreign ministry. And I told them, look, I just have one request. And it's not a request. It's the only order I'll ever give you. That's don't leak, because you can only make that mistake once. And thank God I've gone through almost a year in the Washington embassy with no leaks. And probably a large part of the success of Operation Rising Lion and Midnight Hammer and the entire engagement that we had here with the administration was successful because there were no leaks, at least not from the embassy. So the personal experience is very much part of my public life. My son always used to say that when he was in training in Shaldag, the Delta Force of Israel, he used to say when he came back from long hikes with a lot of weight on his back that he was able to sustain long hikes with 60, 70 kilo on his back because he carried the weight of his bubbies and his zaydis on his shoulders, the weight of their hopes and prayers that one day they'll come back to the land of Israel. And he said when he carries their hopes and prayers on his shoulders, the physical weight is lessened, is lightened. The burden is light. So now it's for me to carry him on my shoulders. And the truth is that right before Hanukkah, and I want to say the most important thing I could say, I come from a generation that prides itself on yichus, right? On yichus, on our pedigree. My father and my grandfather and my great-grandfather was such and such. And I fully sign on to that. I come from a long line of very prestigious rabbanim and Talmidei Chachamim, scholars. But I think we live in a generation where our pedigree is no less, not only on our past, but on our future, our children. Our children are a generation of Maccabees. Maccabees. I mean that in the fullest sense of the word. And I think it's a generation that's even bigger than the Maccabees, because the Maccabees were a small minority of the Jews at the time. And here we had a generation of hundreds of thousands of young men and women who rose up on October 7th and took responsibility and literally saved the country. And we have much to be proud of, and we have much to say about our yichus, and our yichus is our children that we have the zchut of bringing
Right.
into this world.
That's right. I have said that for the last couple of years. My yichus on my family side, they were all fruit and vegetable peddlers. That's the yichus there. But I look at my yichus as going forward with my children as well, and the Jewish education that they're getting and their ties to the Medina, to the state of Israel, is a wonder to behold. All right, that was the emotional side. Let's talk a little tachlis right now, Yechiel. I read the newspapers as everybody else on this Zoom call does, and they hear our President Trump talking about this and about that, inviting people into the Oval Office who are not friends of Israel, as Mayor-elect Mandamni has, just went through. How would you characterize U.S.-Israel relations today, strategically, operationally, and politically?
Well, I don't think we've ever had a better friend in the White House. And many different people are going to be invited into the White House. I wouldn't get too
Agreed.
riled over the Mamdani visit. The president has an approach which is actually, in many respects, it's very admirable that he's willing to talk to his ideological opponents, his political opponents, and bring them in. I mean, think about it. Marco Rubio is a very powerful Secretary of State, and yet he campaigned against President Trump. Was not always very flattering, and certainly not J.D. Vance. I mean, he had said some very startling things about Trump way back when, and yet he chose him as his vice president. So I think that something we can learn from the president. One can actually forgive and move on, and not get mired in personal issues. For the most part, we have never had a better relationship with the White House. I mean, look, in just one example regarding the Iranian nuclear program. In 1981, we had a very sympathetic president of the White House, sympathetic to Israel, Ronald Reagan. And yet, when Menachem Begin took the decision to take out the nuclear reactor in Osirak, Iraq, Reagan was irate and threatened Israel with sanctions. In 2007, when Bush 45 was president, we took out the nuclear reactor in Syria. He didn't threaten us with sanctions, but he wasn't the happiest of campers either. And yet, with Operation Rising Lion and Midnight Hammer, the level of collaboration was total. And it went on for 3 months, despite what you heard in the news for the 3 months prior to June 12th. That was quite amusing to me. I would come out of the Oval Office after meetings regarding the plannings of the operation, and I'd hear all sorts of reports about daylight between the president and the prime minister. There was a harsh phone call. Ambassador Witkoff is going to stab Israel in the back. There's going to be a deal behind Israel's back. Israel won't be able to act militarily. And there wasn't a scintilla. There wasn't even a hint of truth in all of those reports. And at some point, I turned to my colleague, Ron Dermer, who was with me in those meetings, and said, this is great. We couldn't have even asked for this kind of disinformation. Nobody thinks that what we're really planning is going to happen. And that's exactly what happened. We didn't plan for it that way. But at the time when all these reports were coming out that there's daylight and the United States is not going to let us act, at the very same time, our intel community and our Air Force was sitting with the U.S. Air Force and planning these operations. People should understand that this isn't just a matter of, flying B-2s in out of nowhere,
Right.
sending in the bombs and leaving. There's weeks and weeks and weeks of preparation that go into that, without going into detail. But there's weeks and weeks of preparation that was necessary and that went on, prior to the operations of Rising Lion, Midnight Hammer. So there's never been that level of collaboration. Now, for the most part, on pretty much every front, there's understanding that Israel is facing a 7-front war. And this is not a war like any other war. Something that I try to drill home to all the senators and congressmen I meet with almost daily. This is not Russia, Ukraine. This is not Rwanda, Congo. This is not Thailand, Cambodia. This issue is one which is existential. Iran's designs on Israel are not a border dispute. Hamas and Hezbollah and Houthis are not a border dispute. This is a dispute over whether or not Israel has a right to exist. And there is no compromise on our right to exist. And we have to drill that home. And as Jews in this country, in America, I highly recommend to my co-religionists, stop saying thank you when you invite a guest speaker to your dinners and they say, I believe that Israel has a right to exist, and everybody applauds. Or they say, I believe that Israel has a right to defend itself, and everybody applauds. And I challenge you, because I don't think there's any other ethnic group or national group or religious group anywhere in the world that if they were told they have a right to exist, they'd say thank you. I mean, imagine you go to a dinner in Belgium. You sit down to dinner in Brussels to raise money for some NGO, and the speaker says, I believe Belgium has a right to exist. You think anybody would applaud them? Think he's nuts? Or go to a dinner for, I don't know, Mali or Burkina Faso and say, I think you have a right to defend yourself. They'd laugh you out of the room. But you say to a group of Jews, you have a right to defend yourself, and we feel kumbaya. Of course we have a right to exist. We have more of a right to exist, at least as much right to exist as anyone else, perhaps more. We've been at it for much longer than anyone else. And yes, Mr. Carlson, we are the same people that appear in the Bible. I don't have to prove that to you either. You just have to get over your ignorance and anti-Semitic grasp of things and understand that we carried the burden of the Bible even when it was most difficult and when everybody anticipated that we'd dissipate into thin air, that the persecutions that we faced would finish us off. So yes, we're the same people, and we have every right to exist, and we have every right to defend ourselves. And if anybody questions that, they should get over it.
You just spoke very nicely about the Trump administration. And I'm not being critical of that. I think you're 100% on point. But do you see any friction points within the next year between our two countries? Are we talking about Saudi Arabia demanding too much for normalization? Are we talking about uh, it's hard to, let's talk about normalization. Do you see any friction points with the Trump administration push towards that with Saudi Arabia?
There might be friction points, and it's only natural. Each country has to put its interests first. And I have no issue with America first, as most of my interlocutors in the administration have no issue with Israel first. Israel puts its interests first. America puts its interests first. And the nice thing about it is, that 99% of the time, our firstest interests are aligned. Now, is there going to be a possibility here and there where our interests won't be completely aligned? It's possible. And we'll work it out. We have always worked it out. And I think particularly with this administration, we'll be able to work it out. And we shouldn't shy away, from the possibility of frictions involved. Look, we had this issue on the 20-point plan regarding Gaza. So diplomacy is an act of what's possible. You have to maximize what's possible. And when we had three major points we needed to get into that 20-point plan. And those were the 3 points that were decided upon on October 8th, 2023, right after the massacre. The government decided 3 things. Number one, anything we do moving into the future has to include the release of all our hostages, the complete disarming of Hamas, and the demilitarization of Gaza. All of those points were included in the 20-point plan. Nobody could have imagined a week before the 20-point plan was signed that was possible. And yet the United States signed on with all of the partners they brought in to the disarming of Hamas, its demilitarization of Gaza, and of course the release of all our hostages. Now, in that diplomatic balancing act, those other Arab states who came in together with the United States to support that plan and ultimately forced the hand of Hamas to release the hostages demanded something regarding a Palestinian state. Now, we can't live with a Palestinian state. It's not relevant for us. The bandwidth in Israel for a Palestinian state has been reduced to a hair's breadth. But we did agree to the wording of Article 19, which is under the circumstances of reform, we'd agree to a pathway after reform to a Palestinian state. Now, do we think that pathway is going to happen? Do we think that there's going to be reform? There hasn't been in 35 years. We don't think they're going to start now. And that's determined by us, not by anybody else. So was it worth it for us to, bite our lip on that phraseology of Article 19 in order to get our hostages out and to get the commitment for Hamas to be disarmed and the demilitarization of Gaza? Yes, that's part of diplomacy. That's something we had to do. So will there be points of friction? Yeah, sure. But look, I had an incident this week. I'll be very frank with you. The Congress passed the NDAA, and included in the NDAA is the release of all the Caesar sanctions on Syria. Now, we urge a much greater degree of caution before all the sanctions are removed from Ashara, Julani. Okay, Julani is a terrorist. Well, at least he was for many years. And it's quite possible that he has turned over a new leaf. He's done a full mea culpa. But there isn't a long history of jihadis becoming Jeffersonians overnight. So we cautioned the administration. We thought they should go much slower on this, and at the very least put in some clauses that would snap back the sanctions if he didn't live up to certain requirements. And our basic requirement is a demilitarized zone in southern Syria so that jihadi forces can't move south, so that our border won't be threatened, and our Druze neighbors, our brothers and sisters across the border, would not be threatened either, because we saw what happened in July when jihadi forces came south, and there were some 1,200 members of the Druze community in Sueda that were killed, slaughtered. We can't have that. We don't need international war on our border, and we have to protect our Druze, but most importantly, we have to protect our border. And our defense doctrine post October 7th is no more jihadis on our border. Not in the north, not in the south, anywhere. We cannot have jihadis on the border. And we're going to be very insistent upon. So here there's a little point of contention, disagreement. We made our point well known. We think you should wait to remove the sanctions, but the president had a different view, and we respect that view. It's going to be harder now to enter into a security agreement with Syria, but it's just part of diplomacy. It's something we're going to have to finesse under these circumstances. But on the whole, uh, look, when I came to Washington, there was a functional embargo on arms. The formal embargo just dealt with 2,000-pound bombs, but the apparatchiks, the bureaucrats in the system, walked back the already agreed upon armaments that we had paid for that were being held up. And the first thing the prime minister told me I have to put on my agenda is getting that embargo released. Our soldiers were fighting with one hand tied behind their back. We had to get the armaments there. The first thing the president did was lift that embargo and put everybody, full throttle forward to get the arms overseas immediately. Another thing that's really very, very, very important, the last administration was putting the emphasis on sanctioning our ministers or settlers in Judea and Samaria. They were moving towards this sanctioning of individuals. This administration is sanctioning Iranian companies that are involved in smuggling oil to China and are involved in sending funding to Hezbollah and Hamas. We think it could be done faster. We think it could be done more forcefully. But the will is there and the action is there, both functionally and formally, to sanction as many of our enemies as possible. The fact that the Muslim Brotherhood was deemed a terrorist organization, that's huge. Now, we think it could go further, not just Lebanon, Jordan, and Egypt. Muslim Brotherhood is an international cabal that really is dedicated to the idea of destroying Western civilization. People have to appreciate that, understand it, educate themselves about the Muslim Brotherhood, and understand that all these terrorist offshoots in the Sunni world are offshoots of the Muslim Brotherhood. But nevertheless, we waited years for an administration to come and outlaw the Muslim Brotherhood, and that's been done. So there's so many good things happening. So, in answer to your question, Steve, is it possible? Yeah, there are already things that we have to deal with. We have to finesse, but for the most part, we are blessed to have this administration in power.
I hear you saying, I found it very interesting this past week or so that two American states, Texas and Florida, have declared CARE as a terrorist organization, in addition to the Muslim Brotherhood. And people are making fun of the two governors. How does a state governor do that? Well, I think the answer is right there in front of us. They're bad actors, and the states have the right to determine who they could declare persona non grata, and that's what we've seen. But speaking of you mentioned earlier Seven Front War. Are we still living in that war with multiple fronts? Are we seeing actually a diminution in from the Houthis? Obviously, we haven't. When I was in Israel in September, we had one alert. We haven't had anything in several months coming out of the Houthis. Is that war actually calming down because of Israeli and American actions and deterrence?
Well, it's important to understand the overall strategy of Iran, which was architected by Soleimani, who Trump took out in the first Trump administration. Soleimani's design on Israel was to create a ring of fire around the country. Now, it's important to understand, very often, certainly to this audience, everybody knows about the size of Israel, right? I often point out to non-Jewish audiences, we talk about Israel being the size of New Jersey. It's actually misleading because New Jersey is much wider than Israel.
Yes, right.
I always compare it to the hot dog and the hamburger. We're just a long hot dog, and it's very easy to cut us in half. I mean, the main reason why Ben Gurion decided to build two ports, one in Haifa and one in Ashdod, was because he was afraid, actually, that invading armies would cut Israel in half at its narrowest point, just north of Tel Aviv, south of Netanya. And we would be left without a port. So that's why we have two ports, Haifa and Ashdod. And now, together with Judea and Samaria, we are greater Israel. Have you heard that expression? Greater Israel. How do you refer to a country that can fit into Indiana 4 times as something greater? I mean, there's a whole theory about language being a source of power. How much power do you pack into that? The linguistic wordsmithing. It's the whole thing is just such a bunch of nonsense. Greater Israel. We're a tiny little country, and the idea that Suleimani had was for this tiny little country was because it developed a strong conventional army, was to create a ring of fire, which means that Iran would have proxies all around Israel. The Hamas in the southwest, Houthis in the southeast, Hezbollah in the north, the Assad regime, Hezbollah Iraq, and of course, the Arabs of Judea and Samaria would attack all at once. And while everybody was attacking Israel all at once, all around this, creating this ring of fire, Iran would shoot these ballistic missiles into the center of Israel. Now, it's important to understand what happened on October 7th. I think this is overlooked very often or misunderstood. Sinwar jumped the gun. He wasn't supposed to attack that morning, but his hatred overwhelmed him. He thought this was his opportunity, and he was going to do it by himself, and he was sure that immediately everybody would join in, which they didn't. But imagine that for a second, that as Hamas was invading, did what they did in the south, Hezbollah would do the same thing in the north. So we'd have thousands and thousands of people killed. We'd have an invasion by tens of thousands of people. And at the same time, the Arabs of Judea and Samaria would rise up and attack adjacent towns and villages, maybe even go into the cities. And at the same time, the Houthis would fire missiles, and Hezbollah Iraq would fire missiles. And then the ballistic missiles that Iran has would land in the center of the country. Okay? Parentheses. It's important to understand what these ballistic missiles are. They're like semi-trailers. When you pass a semi-trailer on the New Jersey Expressway and it goes by 70 miles an hour, you feel that little push. The air kind of pushes the car a little bit. So you know what the size of these things are. Imagine that semi-trailer packed with explosives. But now it's careening through the skies at 4 times the speed of sound. So when that hits with explosives at that velocity, the level of destruction is immense. And if several of these hit at the same time, it's like a nuclear bomb. Now, thank God, because the United States of America positioned defense missile systems, the THAAD missile defense system, the Aegis missile defense system, alongside of our Arrow system and our David Sling system and our Iron Dome system. So the 5 systems together kept 88% of these ballistic missiles out of central Israel. But if the Iranians are able to fire hundreds at one time, not dozens, they will overwhelm the system. They will overwhelm the defense systems. And that 12% that actually hit would rise to 22 and 32 and 42%. And the level of damage would be immense. Now, if that happened on October 7th, which was the original plan, all of these young men and women who went sailing south, this was a miracle. I talked about the Maccabees before. These were Maccabees. Everybody jumped in their car and went careening south. There was no order to do so. They were not under command. It wasn't an organized counter-assault, but everybody understood their responsibility. Just an amazing thing. Viktor Frankl once wrote that next to the Statue of Liberty, you need to create a statue of responsibility. Well, we don't do statues. We're people of responsibility. Our kids took responsibility. They just left their kids with their neighbors, with their wives, and took their personal weapons and went sailing south, saved the country. Now imagine that these ballistic missiles are hitting the center of the country. All of these kids wouldn't have been able to reach the south. And the penetration of Hamas terrorists would have reached Kiryat Gat and maybe even the outskirts of Tel Aviv. They would have been unstoppable. As these ballistic missiles are falling, there wouldn't have been roads for us to get there. So all of this ring of fire we're dealing with. And the head of the snake in Iran. Everybody's been degraded. Iran's been degraded. Hezbollah's been degraded. Hamas has been degraded. Assad regime fell. Hezbollah Iraq is being held back. The Arabs in Judea and Samaria are constantly trying to carry out attacks, but there's no massive attack like anything like October 7th. It's under control. So everybody's been degraded, but not defeated. So we're at a state now where we have to press our American ally and the other few allies we have left in the world to whatever degree they can understand this. And certain people understand it. It's ironic that the next person to understand is the Chancellor of Germany, who said that Israel's doing the dirty work for the rest of the world. Yeah, that's exactly it. We're doing the dirty work because if we downplay and degrade Islamism or extreme Islam, radical Islam, that's going to allow moderate Islam to rise. And the difference between moderate Islam and radical Islam is whether or not Islam is willing to live in peace with the West, to accommodate the West, to give up on the idea of a globalism, of a global Islam. Okay, that's the real battle going on within Islam, and that's our challenge. If we degrade radical Islam, that will give the chance for moderate Islam to rise. So that brings me to the question of Saudi Arabia, which very much wants to go in that direction, but still is very much divided within itself. It's not the UAE. The UAE made a firm unilateral determination after 2011 to go moderate, full throttle. And, I worked in Abu Dhabi prior to the war. I walked around Abu Dhabi with my kippah, all around Abu Dhabi, in the streets of Abu Dhabi. I went from meeting to meeting, never wore a hat. And I felt more comfortable. I felt more comfortable in Abu Dhabi with my kippah than I do in any European city. I will not walk with my kippah in the middle of Paris. Paris, liberty, equality, and fraternity. You can't walk with your kippah today in Paris and feel safe. Not in London, in pretty much not in any European city. In Abu Dhabi, you can walk through the streets with your kippah and feel completely safe. And that's because the UAE took a decision in 2011 after the Arab Spring to rid the country of Muslim Brotherhood. Now, Saudi Arabia is not exactly there yet. And by the way, the UAE didn't say Palestinian state at all costs. They said, all we're asking for is that you won't annex for the next 2 years. Okay. All right, we didn't annex. There are a lot of issues with annexation, and Israel itself domestically is not yet ready for. So it was worth that announcement, and to have an ally as the UAE for now. If you have conversations in Riyadh with Saudis, they'll tell you quietly that that's not the issue. Palestinian statehood is not the issue. They have to pay mouth service to it, lip service to it. But their real issue is defense treaty with the United States, a civilian nuclear program within Saudi Arabia. That's much more important to them than no Saudi is up at night worrying about the Palestinians. Okay, let's just get that off the table. So if they move completely like the UAE in the direction of moderation, and I think that's where it's going, because that's where the United States is prodding them towards. That's where MBS himself wants to go, but it's a generational divide there. It's very complicated. And there are a lot of other factors they're juggling. And as far as the Abraham Accords 2.0 is concerned, we should be ready for surprises. I'm not sure that everybody's convinced the next one in line is Saudi Arabia, but who knows? Maybe there's a whole bunch of, after Kazakhstan, there's a whole bunch of Central Asian countries who are all Muslim who could join, and maybe Indonesia, slightly larger than all the Muslim population in the Middle East combined, that has shown interest in joining the Abraham Accords. That would be a big, big move forward, big coup d'etat. But it has a lot to do with the battle for the soul of Islam within Islam, as to whether or not it is going to continue to be a globalist uh, theology, which insists on embracing the entire globe, and everybody has to move into a Islamist mode, or it's ready to accommodate and live side by side with Judeo-Christian civilization.
You mentioned radical Islam. Um, what can what should American Jewry be doing here in the States about the radical preachers that we do see? Their presence is on YouTube and internet, elsewhere, on Twitter and Facebook. How should American Jewry respond to these people basically calling for Islamic takeover of the United States?
Look, I represent the state of Israel. I don't want to. I don't want to be giving advice to American Jewry. On a personal level, I could just say the Israeli spirit is such, which would encourage you in the face of this kind of hatred, this kind of acrimony, this kind of um, delegitimization, is to fight. You have to fight. I mean, look, the I've met students across the country that face the anti-Semitism on campus over the past 2 years, and the spirit of some of these kids is just amazing. They're fighters. Many are fighters, and they insisted that they're not going to take this demonization of Jews on campus lying down. I've made it a business here at the embassy. I meet with students every week from around the country. I do Zooms with them, and whenever I leave Washington, I insist that for every speaking engagement I'm invited to, I include a university on the agenda. I've been to Princeton, I've been to UCLA, I've been to SMU, I've been to Florida universities, I've been to University of Atlanta. As much as I can, I get to students here in Washington, to George Washington, GWU, American University. The students are fighting back, and they deserve a lot of credit and a lot of support. But I think organized Jewry. This is a big issue, and it's not only imams that are preaching, and you have these influencers on TikTok and YouTube who are really the reincarnations of Goebbels. I mean, the stuff that I hear on YouTube is just, it's really mind-boggling. And you have these demagogues parading around all sorts of lies, and they kind of state it matter of factly. Someone said, "Well, I know for a fact that Benjamin Netanyahu goes around the Middle East saying that he owns President Trump." And it's just so utterly stupid, so utterly foolish, so utterly untrue. Anybody who knows Netanyahu or Trump, the relationship, it's just ridiculous. Or someone who said, the United States pays for Israeli health care. Push back. It's a lie. We have copay the same way you have copay in Canada or in Great Britain. It's similar to Obamacare in many respects. So pay for Israel. The United States receives back from Israel far more than it invests in Israel. I think it was the chairman of the Air Force, the commander of the Air Force, General Keegan, who once said that without Israel, he'd need 5 CIAs. Well, 5 CIAs is worth about $70 billion. All right. I mean, I know at least some of the level of intel that we share with the U.S. No one shares the amount of intel that we do with the U.S. We're actually an extension in many respects of U.S. intel. How much is that worth? Can you put a figure on that? And then when people talk about the $3.8 billion,
Right.
yeah, $3.8 billion, of which 3.3 is spent here. Is spent here, in Lockheed Martin in Texas, and that 3.8 that's spent here, 3.3 of which is spent here, is totals about 1 million jobs. 1 million jobs. Now, is that worth it for the United States? And then when Lockheed Martin in Fort Worth produces the F-35s, no Air Force in the world has as much flight time. As a matter of fact, all the Air Force in the world with F-35s don't add up to the flight times that our pilots have in the F-35s. All of that information is collated and reverts back to the to the Secretary of War and to Lockheed Martin itself in order to upgrade and improve the performance of the F-35. How much is that worth? It's worth billions. It's worth billions. And I asked, actually, I don't have it with me. Oh, actually, I do. Let me show you this. I don't know if it comes up on the screen, but take a look at all these lines that are Israeli companies ordering American products in the U.S. Pretty much in every state, we have business. Many of them in the security related industries, but not exclusively. A lot of research and development, a lot of high tech stuff going on, pretty much in every state in the U.S. So the vast majority of congressmen are not about to hop on the bandwagon of the Carlsons and some of the other masters at integrating ignorance and arrogance. The most potent, the most toxic form of delegitimization is the brew of arrogance and ignorance. There are people who are arrogant, but they're ignorant. And there are people who are ignorant and not arrogant. Put the two together, and it's really a toxic brew. And all of this stuff coming out now about Israel owning Washington or AIPAC owning Washington. Qatar put $300 billion into the United States. That's been documented. According to the FDD, Foundation Defense of Democracies, that's only 25% of what they really spend. It's really over $1 trillion. But they have receipts for $300 billion. Who can compete with that? What Jew or what Jewish organization can compete with that? $300 billion, which includes $20 billion to higher education, $7 billion to K-12. All this nonsense about AIPAC owning Washington or Israel owning Washington. Look, I'm here. So if Israel owns Washington, I'm like the CEO, okay? And let me tell you, I don't own anything. Nothing. Zilcho, whammo. I go into meetings and try to convince people, most successfully, of the righteousness of our cause. And if we were owning anything, right, like maybe an Al Jazeera type media, maybe we wouldn't have been accused of genocide, starvation, ethnic cleansing. By the way, for a people that implemented genocide, starvation, ethnic cleansing over 2 years, we do it fairly successfully. We did it without leaving a trace. Right? It's quite an accomplishment. Where is it all now? Where is this genocide? Where's the starvation? Where are the bodies? In Sudan, where there's starvation, everybody sees the bodies. And here you've got, Carlson and other people like that saying, we killed tens of thousands of children. No, we didn't. It's a lie. It's a big lie. I go into the lion's den unabashedly and tell them this week. I was with I spent an hour and a half with the editorial board of the New York Times here in Washington and the editorial board of NBC the following day. I tell them, you're participating in a blood libel. It's a blood libel that's no different than claiming that we put poison in the wells of Europe or we use blood in our matzahs. And when I tell you a short anecdote, when I met with the editorial board of the New York Times in New York, and at some point, you go into this like a firing squad. There's about 20 people in the editorial board, and one after another, they're talking about genocide and starvation. And I said, you're participating in a blood libel. You have no proof of this. And on the contrary, I said, my son may be alive today if we were doing what you accused us of doing. We don't strafe bomb population centers indiscriminately. We don't prevent food from coming to non-combatants. It's nonsense. And somebody said, well, how could everybody be wrong? Right? Everybody believes that to be the case. So how could everybody be wrong? I said, really? How can everybody be wrong? Maybe it has something to do with the fact that the newspaper, which only prints news which is fit to print, puts a picture of an 18-month-old baby with protruding spine on the front page of its newspaper, which 150 million people see. But you accuse Israel of starving this baby. And how can one with the soul see the picture of the baby and not be outraged at Israel? And a few days later, it becomes known to everyone who cares that the baby was suffering from cystic fibrosis. And you cropped out his brother, who was standing next to him in the picture, who's perfectly healthy. So you don't mention it's cystic fibrosis. You accuse us of starvation. And then you say, how is it that everybody thinks you're starving people? I said, it may be because of you. You know what one of the editors said to me? You, Ambassador, Your Excellency, yeah. You may be taking a misappropriation too far. That was her response. You may be taking a misappropriation too far. I said, ma'am, saying that Israel is starving that baby is not misappropriation. Not mentioning the baby is suffering from cystic fibrosis is not misappropriation. It's a blood libel. Call it what it is. It's a blood libel. And then when people get on a plane in Chicago with a gun and fly to Washington and look for two of my employees, young diplomats here at the Israeli embassy in Washington, and shoot them in the head while he's screaming, free, free Palestine, you have something to do with that. You are inciting these people. There are going to be deranged people who are going to say, well, if that's what Israel's doing, I'm going to target Israelis. And sure enough, just last week, there was somebody on Piers Morgan, an influencer who has a large following on TikTok, who said that the murder of our two employees here at the embassy was resistance. It's resistance. It's resistance because Israel is murdering children. So if Israel is murdering children, you're going to reach out and murder Israelis to resist their murder of children. That's incitement. And what you got to do about incitement is fight back. You got to fight back. You got to tell the truth. It's not easy. The truth takes much longer than lies. Lies are much more attractive. But we've been at this now for 3,500 years. From the very moment that Abraham said, you guys have it all wrong. Man does not make God. God makes man. It was a revolutionary idea. And he was also accused of all sorts of things and thrown into a fiery furnace. Ever since that moment, we've been taking unpopular lines, but we've been promoting the truth. And we have to continue to do so.
How are you for time on your end?
I'm about very close to the hard stop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me end with this question. What should we look for in 2026 that will signal to us that the region is stabilizing or unraveling?
What should we look for?
What will signal to us that things are working out well or the opposite? Any particular item or idea that comes to mind to you?
The most important thing is that the process of degrading Iran and its enemy and its proxies continues. That's the most important thing. We're at a point where all of these proxies are trying to reconstitute. Okay, we've degraded them dramatically. Let's say we brought them down from 90% to 30% or 35%. But they're all trying to reconstitute. I mean, even in this situation now where Iranians don't have water.
Right.
They don't have electricity. They're suffering. Even under these circumstances, Iran has already sent $1 billion in 2025 to Hezbollah to reconstitute. By the way, the money is going through Turkey.
Yes.
So we have to see this this attempt to reconstitute brought back down again, degraded again. It's not just mowing the grass, as we call it. Has to be, uprooting the grass, not just mowing the lawn. We have to uproot this process because otherwise it's going to rear its ugly head from time to time. The Hamas is trying to reconstitute, so we have to follow through on the plan that they get disarmed. And the same thing with Hezbollah. We are absolutely convinced that Hezbollah can be disarmed, must be disarmed, and that the majority of Lebanese want to do exactly that. But they have to be given assistance. We have to help them build up the Lebanese armed forces and help train them. And ultimately, we think that at the same time move towards solidifying our relationship with the moderate states who want to move in that direction. We still have to deal with the Houthis, and we're going to. The United States began the operations against Houthis. We're going to have to finish it. Hopefully, we'll be able to finish it together with two other countries in the region, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, who are both committed to defeating the Houthis. The problem is there are differences between Saudi Arabia and the Houthis. They both get on this issue. I'm sorry, Saudi Arabia and the UAE. On this issue, there isn't a division with Israel. Both Saudi Arabia and the UAE are on the same side of Israel. The problem is that the UAE and Saudi Arabia argue over how the Houthis should be defeated, and that's why they haven't been able to get onto the same page. So who knows? We may be able to broker an agreement with the two countries and take on the Houthis, which would see all three of us defeat them. This is a vicious enemy. The Houthis, they're very, very dangerous people, and we think it's elementary that the international community would not allow a situation where terrorists with ballistic missiles would take control over major maritime artery. I mean, this could affect international trade. And if they're allowed to get away with it, other malign groups, whether it's at the Panama Canal or whether it's at the shipping that goes through Singapore, which is over 50% of shipping coming out of the Far East through the Straits of Malacca, this is very, very significant. So we still have to deal with the Houthis. We still have to make sure that Hamas, Hezbollah are degraded. We have to see to it, together with our American ally, that Iraq does not become the next playground for Iran, which it is trying to do. We hope and pray that Syria will remain stable. It's an issue. We have to protect our Druze, and we have to protect our border. We cannot have jihadis sitting at the border anymore. So we have our challenges. We have work cut out for us, but there's a great determination to make sure that we succeed. And I think Israel is stronger than it's ever been. We must move into the next phase of defense cooperation with the United States. I think we're valued tremendously because of what we've accomplished in the area of defense technology. Much of what is being spoken about in the U.S. about the Golden Dome is going to involve Israeli technology. And of course, the most important thing, remember this, please, most important statistic in the world. There's an organization called the OECD, which is the Organization of Education and Cultural Development. This is the of economic and cultural development. This is the organization which encompasses all developed nations, 36, I think at last count, maybe 37. There's only one country of the developed nations of the world with replacement fertility. Replacement fertility means you have at least 2 children per family. None of the developed countries in the world have replacement fertility. barring one, state of Israel. So if you don't believe in miracles, that's the one miracle you ought to believe in, because we're 3 generations after a Holocaust. And 3 generations after a Holocaust, the only developed nation in the world with a future is Israel. If you don't have children, you don't have a future. You need immigration, large, large amounts of immigration. If you don't want immigration, you don't want children, you have nobody to work in your factories in order to pay for your pensions. So you have no future. Israel is the only country with a future. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for being an excellent spokesman for the state of Israel, and you are worthy of the title, His Excellency. I'm just
Thank you very much, Steve. It's good to be with you. Shabbat
thank you.
Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Well, um, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I'm just going to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, a good Shabbos in certain circles, and a peaceful weekend. There'll be more programs like this in the coming months, and I hope you'll join us then. Um, if you do have a chance to visit our website, rza.com, please do so. rza.org, please do so. And I'll wish you a good Shabbos as well. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.